Hi, everyone. This is Danny Walson, City North Pole. Just want to do a sound check.
Hey Danny, yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, perfect. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thanks.
So you can go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Okay, we are unmuted.
All right, cool. Welcome, everybody. This is the Fast Planning Technical Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, October 4th, 2023. We're calling this meeting to order at 12:02 p.m. For introduction of committee members, I see with us here today, we have Yemi Alimi sitting in for Nick Zarnecki. We have Michelle Denton, Kevin McKinley, Brett Nelson, Bob Pristash, Bill Rogers, John Natardis, Jacob Toyrick, and Danny Wallace. Members that appear to be absent at this time are Justin Burgess, Kate Duber, Lieutenant Mike Roberts, and RJ Stump, and John Weinberger. I think I skipped over Kellen Spillman. He's here as well. So any of those committee members that I listed as absent, if you're in the meeting, can you announce your presence?
Hey, Jackson, this is RJ Stump from Fairbanks International.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us, RJ. Okay, that's who we have with us today. We do have a quorum. For Fast Planning staff, we have with us myself, Jackson Fox, Olivia Lunsford, Deborah Todd, and Corey DiRutigliano. And then for guests in the meeting today, we have Don Galligan, Randy Bailey, Megan Flory, Jack Barnwell, Julie Jenkins, Ethan Mahoney, and Michael Luxon. Is there anyone else attending the meeting as a guest today that I didn't announce?
Adam Moser just joined us.
Okay, and for the record, Adam Moser just joined us. Okay, here are no additional attendees. That's who we have with us. Let's move on to approval of the October 4th, 2023 meeting agenda. Do I have a motion on the agenda?
Oh, this is Yemi Alimi. I move to approve.
Thank you, Yemi. Is there a second?
This is Michelle, second.
Bill Rogers got it. All right, any changes to today's agenda? All right, hearing none, anyone opposed to approval of the agenda as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider it approved and move on to the approval of the September 6th, 2023 meeting minutes found on pages 2 through 5 of the packet. Do I have a motion on the minutes? Approve.
Motion, this is Kevin McKinley, motion to approve the minutes.
Let me give it to Kellen, second by Kevin McKinley. All right, any edits to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Anyone opposed to approval of the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider those approved. And move on to committee and working group reports, which begins on page 6 in your packet. I just have one report to provide to the technical committee today, which is the long list of action items from the policy board meeting, which was held on September 13th. So going through these kind of in chronological order, the policy board did approve our comment letter on the 2024 through 2027 statewide transportation improvement program document that they approved that comment letter without any additional revision or amendments, and that was transmitted to DOT for their records. Again, as I noted during our last meeting, that comment letter was delivered to DOT 10 days after the close of the comment period, but they did respond to let us know that they still will accept those comments and are working on the responses as we speak. At the policy board meeting, they also approved the use of our offset balance from 23 towards advanced construction payback in 2024. They also supported the state's proposal for a new Metropolitan Planning Fund distribution formula. So there is support from both ourselves and our counterpart down in Anchorage, AMATS, for that new fund distribution formula. They also advanced our request to DOT to utilize a portion of the $3.8 million in unobligated planning funds balance, which has been building since around 2015. However, they did make one revision to that. They did remove the request for $150,000 for the downtown streets traffic study, which was an engineering study to look at a one-way versus two-way street conversion for the downtown core. So that was removed from our request prior to being delivered to DOT. And then also related to our office here, this is a topic that was not discussed at technical, but was discussed with our board. The new metropolitan planning organization down in the Mat-Su Valley is starting up a nonprofit corporation, but they have a lot of steps to get through before they can hire their own staff for that organization down in Mat-Su. And they had asked us if we'd be willing to host a remote employee to stand up that nonprofit corporation down in Mat-Su. And our board unanimously agreed to that co-employment relationship so that we can partner with them, help them get themselves off the ground, and work through their filing their articles of incorporation and developing personnel policies and fiscal policies, and getting their business licenses and liability insurance, et cetera, so that their board down there can, once the corporation is stood up, can hire that employee away from us. Also related to our office, they did approve our proposed 2024 office budget for everything listed in there for personnel, office, and administrative. We are going to have a follow-up item on that for our undesignated fund appropriation. So these are the kind of the community projects we had listed in the last table of the budget. So that'll be discussed at their October 25th meeting. So these are discretionary funds that we can use for different purposes or initiatives here locally. So we're going to continue that conversation at the end of the month, but the office budget has been approved. And that concludes my reports on committee and working group reports. So any questions related to the policy board meeting on September 13th? Yes, Kellen.
I just had one question. The Mat-Su MPO employee, can you just help me out a little bit more here? So we're going to be hosting the employee, but they're going to be paying for it? Is that
correct?
Okay.
So with the Metropolitan Planning Fund distribution formula, there's an allocation for AMATS, there's an allocation for us, there's an allocation for Mat-Su. So as of October 1st, they have available to that Mat-Su MPO about $400,000 underneath a consolidated planning grant. So we would host the employee, process that employee's payroll, benefits, et cetera. But we would be sending 2 invoices to DOT each month, one towards our consolidated planning grant for our staff, and then for this singular employee, we'll be sending a separate invoice to charge to the Mat-Su's consolidated planning grant. And I went through all the direct and indirect costs of hosting an employee and using our indirect cost rate, and we won't lose any funding as a result of that employment relationship. We'll actually gain a little bit of funding. And the purpose of it is not to make money off of this deal, but just to show to the policy board that if we entertain this arrangement, there will be of no lost revenue to Fast Plan.
okay? I understand. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on the policy board meeting? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to our public comment period. Is there any member of the public that wishes to provide testimony today on anything not listed as an action item? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you can proceed with your testimony. I'm not seeing anybody unmute. Public comment period going once, and twice. Okay, we'll close the public comment period and move on to old business item 7A, which is our FAST Improvement Program priorities for federal fiscal years 2025 and 2026. And this begins on page 8 in your packet. So today's action item for the FAST Improvement Program is to recommend to the policy board. It's actually 3 lists of projects. One list of projects for construction in 2025, based on the amount of funding we have available, a separate list of projects for 2026, based on the funding that we have available, and then a list of contingency projects should additional funding be allocated to this program for either one of those construction years. The subcommittee working on this has met twice I believe their initial meeting was back in June, where we learned about all the local government priorities for this program. So we came up with a long list of projects. And then over the course of the summer, John Natardis and Ethan Mahoney visited each one of the project sites and developed some planning level estimates for each of those projects. And those were provided back to us. I believe it was it last month or was it end of August? I don't recall. Either way, it was a month or so ago that we were provided those estimates. And so we held a second subcommittee meeting on Monday, September 28th, to bring back all the local governments to the table to look at their project lists and the amounts and begin discussing priorities for each of those three previously mentioned categories. So on page 8, this is just the agenda that we had for that meeting. It was a 2-hour meeting from 1 to 3 p.m. Where we took a look at those numbers and started to develop a list, which I'll present to you here today. But just a few other items of note. The next page, page 9, this shows you in our transportation improvement program how much funding we have available in each of those years. A better way to look at this, because the totals here show both construction and design for this program, is on the next page, page 10. This really simplifies those tables. So basically, John Natardis and his team right now have just over $200,000 at their disposal to design a package for 2025, of which there's $1 million in construction funding in 25. And then next federal fiscal year in 2025, his team will have an additional $200,000 in design to complete the package for construction in 2026. And then below that table, for everybody's information, we do have some unprogrammed funding in this current year and next year in 2025. So just taking 2025, for example, here, there's over $600,000 in surface transportation program funds that is not yet obligated for any particular project. So there is the potential at the policy board level to allocate some or all of this money to the FAST improvement program and fund some of the contingency projects that we're going to discuss on this list. So, so I'm just showing you these two tables here to let you know how much money is devoted to the program at this time, but there is some additional funding that can be added to the program should we want to approve a couple of additional project locations. And that will be a future decision by the board. All right, and then the next page, page 11, just a refresher on the policy on our FAST improvement program. We do aim to allocate for construction 80% of our funding towards traditional roadway projects, and then 20% of this funding towards non-motorized projects. And the nature of these projects is that they have a very limited design effort. There are no right-of-way impacts or right-of-way acquisitions, and there's limited or no utility impacts. So these are projects that are very simple to design, that we can bundle together and put in a plan set that kind of touches a lot of small parts all around our community in Fairbanks and North Pole. All right, so page 12 is the master list of the project nominations and the cost estimate provided by DOT by local government entity. This is the list here that we worked with primarily on September 28th to learn about, what are the top priorities for each of these local governments. So I have notes there in red on the left of what I heard during that meeting. So for the Fairbanks North Star Borough, the priority for rural services was the Viewcrest subdivision. For Parks and Rec, it was the Chena Lake Rec area, which is converting a gravel path to an asphalt trail. The Chena Riverwalk spot repairs on the existing asphalt path on the south side of the Chena River, and then paving the gravel access road at the Birch Hill Rec area. And then also on the borough side for Max Transit, their number one priority was paving Tesoro Avenue, which is currently a gravel road that accesses their brand new maintenance facility that's being built as we speak. And then for the city of Fairbanks, their priorities were, you can see 1 through 5, 8th Avenue, Scheibel Street, Shannon Drive, Joyce Drive, and Doyon Estates. And then for the city of North Pole, they have East and West 4th Avenue, then the 8th Avenue path resurfacing, and Cary Avenue and Andrea Drive. And then for UAF, their number one priority is West Tanana Drive. And I wanted to make a note because it was made very clear to me in the meeting on September 28th that this is a roadway that is on UAF property, but it is a roadway that is heavily used by the community, not just, you know, students and staff up at the university. So this is from the Sheep Creek Extension over to the roundabout at on Tanana Loop Road. So it is a community access point where people that live off of Sheep Creek use on a daily basis, coming into town and going home in the evening. So that was number one priority, followed by Tanana Loop, and then paving the gravel path, pedestrian and bicycle paths of the Taku parking lot along University Avenue. And then for DOT, the list on the bottom there is primarily non-motorized projects. We do know from our Bike and Ped Advisory Committee that some of their top priorities are spot repairs on the Farmers Loop path, spot repairs on the Davis Road path, and then providing some type of improvement for the Scarlin Trail access off of Belaine Road that gets blocked by snow berms in the wintertime. And we don't, the estimate here is of 144,000. I'm not exactly sure what that pertains to, but for right now, we're listing that one as kind of to be determined as DOT is looking at options of what could be erected out there to signal to snowplow drivers to not block in that trail access point. But it is a priority for both the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee and DOT to repave the Mitchell Expressway path along the Mitchell Expressway on the, I think it would be the north side or the east side, where there's a lot of root damage along the path there and some fence repairs that need to be made. So that's what we heard. That's what we heard at the September 28th meeting as far as priorities for each local governments. And the next page, page 13, shows you a spreadsheet that we were working with at that meeting to try to kind of cherry pick some of these projects and put them in for construction in 25, 26, and then also come up with a list of contingency projects. I will make note that as we started building this spreadsheet here, we had initially added the Viewcrest subdivision for Borough Rural Services. But during this meeting, we also had a discussion of this current year's construction program in 2023. There was $2 million in this program invested into Aztec subdivision out in North Pole to repave those roads and actually take a few gravel roads and convert them to pavement. So Borough Rural Services did get the lion's share of this program's funding this current construction season. And so we decided to not include the Viewcrest subdivision because of the benefit that they received that department received this summer, and focus on all of the other entities and departments to try to give them a slice of the pie for these next two construction seasons. So you can kind of see there the list of projects. They're not necessarily in any type of order, but you can see who benefits from those projects, whether it's the city of Fairbanks, city of North Pole, UAF, also the community on those ones, the borough, and then DOT. So you can see that there's kind of a mix of beneficiaries for each of these different project locations. We tried to, at least get the top 3 priorities for each of those entities if possible. And then on the bottom of the table here, I'm going to show you this in a little different format for the action item here today. But at the bottom here, we had a little reality check on the mix of roadway projects versus non-motorized projects and where we came in by percent. Again, we want to try to devote 80% of this funding towards roadway projects and then 20% towards non-motorized. So the list that we came up with pretty closely hits that mark. Within 25, 18% of those projects are non-motorized of the project cost. And then in 26, it's 19%. So we try to stay on target with our policy with this as well. On the next page, page 14, this is the final spreadsheet that I pulled together. This is what I hope to advance to the policy board later this month. This is the typical format that we use to take things to the policy board as it provides, the priorities for each of those construction years, 25 and 26. It lists the entity that benefits from those projects, the project location, the cost, and then we provide a short scope description of what that project entails, whether it's repaving a road or paving the gravel road, doing spot repairs, replacing the sidewalk, et cetera. So it gives a little bit more description other than just the project location. And then you can see on the bottom there, we have that list of contingency projects. Should additional funding become available, there's about $500,000 in projects there. And then also just remember that in 2025, currently we have over $600,000 available that's of funding that's not been programmed to any project. So it is reasonable to believe that we could fund some of these projects out of the contingency list with the unprogrammed funding that we have in 2025. So anyways, that's one of the intents of why we made the contingency list, that should additional funding be available, and it is in 25 currently, we can bump those up to either one of those construction years. So the action item today is to take a look at this list, make any changes or amendments that you'd like to see, and then ultimately make a recommendation to advance this table to the policy board for their October 25th meeting. So I'll stop there and see if there's questions. I don't really want to get into discussion at this time, so just questions. Once we have a motion on the table, we can discuss and consider any amendments or revisions.
I've missed a few meetings and relatively new, but fiscal year 24, there's nothing listed on there. I was just wondering.
In 24, there's no construction funding programmed for this project. It's a year we're skipping.
Very good.
And that's in large part due to next summer, we're supposed to build the Chena Riverwalk on the north side, Wool Road resurfacing, and Yankovich Miller Hill. So we have 3 relatively large projects, and it ate up all the funding for that year. So we didn't have any money to devote in 24 for this program. Any questions? Folks online or in the room? Okay, not seeing any more questions. So is there any public comment on this item today? Okay, not seeing any public comment today on this item. So I'll open the floor for a motion. John, go ahead.
Make a motion to approve this list and send it to the policy board.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Jacob. All right, so discussion. Olivia, if you go back to page 14, we got our master list there. Go ahead, Kelly.
It seems like a good process that everyone went through. Seems like a good agreement. Seems like the money's shared amongst all the participating entities equally. For example, we got a big share this year and appreciate that and are willing to, give to get other big projects in there. So I appreciate everyone that kind of put the time getting into the nitty-gritty on this, but I think this is one of the best programs we have as an entity. We can get these small beneficial projects packaged together and out with one contractor that doesn't charge us an arm and a leg for just little roads.
Yeah.
I'm speaking in favor of this request.
Go ahead, John.
I just have one question. The totals are 1.25 million, 1.27 million, and the amounts, we don't have enough money for this, right? Currently, so how are they funded?
So I had asked the subcommittee to kind of inflate the amount, go a little bit higher than what we had funding available for, and there's a few reasons for that. Each of these years we'll have available to us offset funds from project closures, and so there'll be opportunity to add some more money to these programs as the need arises. But I also want to note that the estimates that were provided to us, I still consider those planning level because the projects are not yet designed, and then so there'll be more accurate quantities once they're designed, and we'll have fresher bid prices when we get closer to those years. So I wanted to go a little bit higher, and then, you know, with the realization that at some point, say a year from now for the 25 program, there will be a better engineer's estimate to rely on, and decisions. I mean, to add 100,000 here, 200,000 there is typically very workable for us. So I wanted to go a little high.
I was just wondering if there was like a technical glitch or something that could happen, but it sounds like we can improve it and move on.
I mean, and also if the funding gets tight and we don't have additional funds, then we may remove one of these projects and put it down to the contingency list, or move it in between 1 year or another year.
Okay. Thank
But I think it's important to get these projects in the design queue, so that should the money be available, the background work on the PSNE set is ready to go. Go ahead,
I
Tom.
have one question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Probably for John or Mr. Tardis. Just, I guess, for my benefit, in general, when your team's designing these projects, what's the expected design life of a repave project?
PM projects, the technical design life is 5 years, but usually we're paving 2 inches of asphalt, which lasts well over 5 years. I know it sounds low, but, these aren't specifically PM projects, they're only big fast planning. So generally, we're designing it to last minimum 5 and probably around 15 to 20. If we ran the pavement analysis, it would probably come out very high. For most of these are low usage roads and paths, and they're well overbuilt. That's how we're done. Doing the minimum that we can do lasts a while.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, other comments, discussion? You can also propose amendments to delete something or add something or move something if you want. All right, radio silence tells me I'm gonna call the question. All right, let's do a roll call here. We'll start out with Yemi.
Yeah,
Michelle,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
John, the
Yes.
artist, Kellen,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob,
Yes.
and Danny.
Yes.
Okay, did I miss anybody? I did last meeting, so I'm just checking. All right, I think I got everybody. All right, thank you, everybody. That's a unanimous vote. And we will advance that to the policy board on October 25th. Okay, our next action item is item 8A underneath new business, the Metropolitan Planning Area Boundary Update. This is an action item for you all today and begins on page 15. And I'm going to turn it over to Olivia Lunsford to provide the staff report and introduction to this item.
Thanks, Jackson. Okay, I will try to not be too technical with this, but we are going to talk a lot about data. So bear with me as we get through just the hard facts, and then we can get to the fun part, which is looking at the actual map. So as you all know, our boundary update is a process that we typically do every 10 years with the decennial census data. We did do a minor update of 2021 to include a portion of the PM 2.5 non-attainment area to bring in Chena Lake Rec area, and then a part of the Tanana wayside into our boundary. So that was a little bit of an anomaly. The things that go into this process include doing a lot of forecasting, and this past census, the census had changed the designation for an urban area from 500 people per square mile to 200 houses per square mile. But when I was running the data, I noticed that the numbers looked kind of similar. So I went and found the average persons per home in the Fairbanks North Borough, and it turns out it's like 2.6 people per house. So I did run both sets of numbers, people per square mile and houses per square mile, to get the projections I'm going to show you in a little bit. But the point of showing you this is that it really wound up being apples to apples. And there are some cities and some communities that really have to pay close attention to that, but for us, we were okay to kind of look at both. So the Alaska Department of Labor projects that by 2040, there will be a population of 101,585,000. And the census population this last go around was 95,655. So that really shows an important minor, however minor it may be, increase of 6.3% in our population. So initially, what we did to kind of narrow our lens to look through with all of this data, because as we all know, the size of the Fairbanks Regional Borough is gigantic. We created an initial area of interest. And when I say we, I'm talking about the Boundary Update Committee. We've been meeting about every 2 weeks, and we just had our 6th meeting yesterday, just to kind of confirm that what we present to you today is on the right track. So when I say we, that's what I mean. The initial area of interest consisted of the existing metropolitan planning area, the 2020 census urban area, and then what I did was I brought in any additional census blocks that were in a half mile of that particular area. And some of those were a little bit big, so the edges were far reaching and jagged, but nonetheless, we included that. And then we also included the road right of way that were touching any of the edges, just so we would have a clear picture of where the boundary crossed over. And then the houses per square mile projections to 2040, which I'll show you in a little bit. We did have some key assumptions, which we'll note in the process documentation for later on. So I'm not going to read them out to you, but they're just important to note. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that we just assumed that everything is staying as it is, like general use land zoning designation is not going to go away within the next however many years, things like that. We did create a pros and cons list. As Jackson and I were going through this, we realized that it was somewhat technical in its wording, but we also couldn't really figure out a way to say the things that are on this sheet any differently. So if anyone has any questions about the pros and cons, please don't hesitate to ask once I'm done with my presentation. But the general understanding from this list is that the smaller boundary, which is what we're presenting with you today, minimum option. The pros are that the funding can be a little bit more concentrated, and we can focus on a longer range of diversified projects rather than repetitive repairs. The larger boundary would potentially match the PM 2.5 non-attainment area. We of course would have a broader reach of transportation planning, and it could give us the potential to increase connectivity. But as you can see, there are cons to all of those as well. And then I wanted to include just a little blurb about what's happening on the map, which we will get to in just a second. But the important thing to note, and this might be helpful just to have next to you when we are looking at the map. A couple important things to note. Number one, the initial area of interest that I told you about at the beginning, that holds about 79% of the housing in the borough, which is quite a large percentage, and 83% of the population in the borough as of 2020. So that really tells us that we're looking at the right area in terms of urbanization or urban area designation by 2040, adding on to what urban area we have now. So we have the 2040 houses per square mile projection. And in order to get that, what I did was I found the percentage of each census block, what percent of the population of each census block made up the block group. And then I applied those percentages to the distribution of the difference in population now and the projection to 2040. So it was fairly simple mathematics, but thousands and thousands and thousands of little blocks with very minor changes in population. It made it very, very repetitive and interesting exercise. So, but it was super cool to do because between the housing data and the persons per square mile data, a lot of the polygons were coming out to be almost exactly the same, which again was affirming and really contributed to my confidence in moving forward with the recommended boundary. So we can move on from this. I did want to give you just a little bit of feedback from the survey. We were able to get in touch with about 10 like industry experts, which honestly, I was super grateful for that level of engagement, just because it is a super busy season for realtors and contractors, surveyors, and et cetera. Everyone's racing the snow. So I was really grateful that we got this level of feedback. The number one thing that I wanted to point out from the survey was that first question that you see: how does the availability and quality of transportation infrastructure impact housing development patterns? And as you can see, everyone responded either to an extent or to a greater significant extent. And this was really important to point out, just because even with me, when I was running the data and then I was trying to draw these lines properly, I was getting so caught up in the residential designation of a parcel, or whether or not there was a house, because that's what the census just kept like drilling into this process as housing. But at the same time, we're looking at the roads that are serving the areas that are going to grow by 2040. So this question and then the response to this question was just really aligning for me in my process. And I thought that it could be useful to all of you. There are some great quotes on there that sort of lend to the same kind of like jog at the memory for remembering what we're thinking about as we're going into this process. And ultimately, road access is a top influence to someone's decision to develop new housing. This question, they had the option to pick as many as they wanted, and almost every single person did pick road access. So now we can look at the actual boundary. So what you see on this map are the yellow, like filled in parcels. That's the housing or houses per square mile projection that I was able to generate by using that percentage of census block per block group and then adding the changing population over a period of time. And again, this is just assuming that everything is staying as it is. So we're not going to change a bunch of zones or anything like that for zoning. It's just gonna remain the way that it is. The black like squares that you see on the map, those are all new construction within the last decade that is residential in nature. So I think it was about 1,800 parcels had new construction, and I was able to go through all the construction data from assessing, and 98% of the new construction within the last 10 years has been residential in nature. So I really wanted to help visualize that on the map, and I think that that layer does a pretty good job of that as well, especially when you see it next to the yellow housing and we know, okay, our population is expecting to grow like 6.8%. That's kind of what this looks like over the last 10 years, just throughout different parts of the borough. So the other things that you're seeing on this map include our existing planning area, which is the blue. And then the purple that's overlaying the blue, you can see that there are some parts of it up to the northwest and kind of to the southwest in this little polygon area, and then obviously over towards Eielson and that Moose Creek area that's a little bit lighter purple. That's all new to us in terms of urban area. And then everything that was in purple we had to include in this boundary. So there were a couple places where we sort of took out just a little tiny bit of the old, or I guess the existing metropolitan planning area, just because of the way that the roads and general connectivity were moving around this new urban area. We also have the military bases designated on here, and there was an initial draft boundary that I had brought to the boundary update committee. And from that, we developed the edited draft boundary. So that's like the reddish orange line. I know these are all bright bold colors, but I'm using a colorblind simulator, and this is readable across all colorblind types. So anyways, I do apologize for the, very vibrant colors, but it also works. So this reddish orange is the proposed boundary that we are bringing to all of you today, and I do have it on the mapping program that I use with, this is the 2020 imagery, so it's not, I know that the borough got 2023 recently, but we're still waiting on it in terms of access. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If I need to go back to any of the slides, just let me know, or if you'd like me to zoom into a particular location, I can do that as well. Today, we're looking on a motion to recommend to the policy board approval of the release of the draft of this for a 30-day public comment period. So that is the goal today. We would be bringing it back to you after public comment period, showing you any comments that we implemented, if we receive any, and there would be ample time to make some tweaks to this if we need to. So, thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. All right, any questions for myself or Olivia? Before we go to public comment, I entertain a motion.
Doesn't look like anyone online either.
Okay, let's open it up for public comment. Any public comment on our new boundary proposal? All right, not seeing any public comment, so let's, do we have a motion? And again, we're focused on that red-orange boundary there. The motion would be to recommend to the policy board to release that draft boundary for a 30-day public comment period. So you're not approving this today, just we need the board to authorize us to release it for public comment. Troy Kelly.
I'll move to recommend to the policy committee release of the minimum draft boundary, the orange, for 30-day public comment.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Yes.
Michelle,
this
second.
is-
I'll give it to Michelle. How's that? Thanks, Michelle. And Yemi. Okay, discussion, comments, questions. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I'll start. I was on the committee, and if you rewind 10 years, I was actually on staff at FMAS, working through a lot of this as well. So we really did get into the nitty gritty, and I like the product. There's a lot that goes into this. But one big approach that I had as a committee member, and I'm carrying it to this seat as well, and I think members of the policy board will carry it as well. We as an organization, in my opinion, get a pretty tiny piece of federal highway funding, roughly $10 million a year. There's no way we can fund all of the needed road improvements across all the entities across the whole area. So I was very focused on trying to not take in what could be very expensive roads in the future. I'll show some examples, but the best example we had in the last 10 years is we as an organization paid for the reconstruction of McGrath Road. That took over a whole year's worth of funding for our organization. And the state, not picking on state by any means, but they have access to so many other pots of funding through the STIP, the statewide program, if something's outside of our boundaries. So the three main roads I wanted to talk about in what my edits were yesterday. If you go over to Chena Pump, Chena Ridge, Olivia. So Chena Pump, Chena Ridge is kind of a really interesting one. So we have to take in all the purple. We're required by federal CFRs to take in all the purple that's on the screen. So we absolutely could take in the whole Chena Pump, Chena Ridge loop. Or we could take on kind of what's shown in the red of just half a Chena Ridge and half a Chena Pump. It almost sounds a little silly to take on half a roads like that, but that whole rest of the section of Chena Pump and Chena Ridge, depending on what the project would be, that's well over a whole year's worth of funding for fast planning. So that's why I was really sensitive to this loop, going through that. Just I felt that the positives of leaving it out really outweighed the positives of bringing it in, mostly with funding allocation. If you think like that improvement program we just divvied up, that was $1 million, and we got 10 different projects for all 4 entities involved here. We're doing one major road like that, that's kind of all gone. Could you go up to Nordale to, or I'm sorry, Blaine.
Okay.
I always say north-south connection. I also had the same eye, in my opinion, with this section of Blaine Road. So again, we've taken on all the purple. You can zoom out a little bit, Olivia. But everything else is really up to our jurisdiction as an entity. So I thought it really wise, in my opinion, to limit the amount of Nordale that was in the boundary, particularly the section going through that area of not so good ground where it crosses Sheep Creek. I'm
Blaine,
sorry,
yeah.
I keep saying Nordale and Blaine.
Same road.
Same.
It is, yeah.
North-south road that goes through Bog. So that was really my intention there, and I'm happy with how it turned out there. And the really tricky one, the entirely tricky road that I'm sure we're gonna have more conversation about after the 30-day public comment period, is Farmers Loop. So we have to take on roughly, I don't know, 75% of Farmers Loop. That's kind of not debatable. We have to take on all that purple, but there's a big gap kind of there in the middle. So we take on the whole road, but then potentially you're leaving a big donut hole in the planning area. So do you take on all of those roads kind of in the middle? Also really struggling with ground condition in there, even maintenance authority, kind of where the Mushers Hall is, the Mushers Trails are. So I thought it wise, if we're calling this a minimum boundary, I thought it wise, at least for public comment period, to show really what is the minimum, really leave kind of that gap in Farmers Loop and not create a donut hole, if you will, with that Kramer's Field, Mushers Hall area. Other than that, I thought we matched existing boundaries very well with the Badger Road area, the North Pole area, and then obviously we have to take on Eielson now. That's what's coming out of the census, and that was really limited to kind of the minimum taken on Moose Creek and Eielson. So those are my thoughts. This is a very good minimum boundary to put out without huge increases in road miles. And those 3 areas I just talked about were what I was just really sensitive to, because we're not going to be getting a big, if any, increase in federal funding now with Matsubi and MPO. So even if we do have more population in the area, we're diluting the money a little bit. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Appreciate that, Colin. Other discussion, comments, questions? Bill, go ahead.
Kellen, Mr. Spillman answered my question about the Rose Creek area.
Yeah.
If you read my mind.
Also, just for transparency, I've been editing this thing nonstop. I did find this red will jut out here. I must have gotten really obsessed with the curve and just forgot about that. So anyway, I'll be correcting that, but it will take in the purple. That's just like off the Farmers Loop area. I went around this thing with a fine tooth comb twice last night and still, but that's what a public comment period is for.
All right, other discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So again, the motion is to recommend that the policy board release this minimum draft boundary out for a 30-day public comment period. And, during which time, each of the entities at the table can provide comment to us, suggestions for any revisions to this map. And of course, once the public comment period closes, we will prepare a summary of those public comments, as well as the responses or resolutions to those comments. and represent that to the technical committee and policy board for approval of our new boundary. We are trying to target submitting this new boundary to the governor's office in December for the state's approval. That's part of the process. So it is of significance to try to get this out for the public comment period sooner than later. And Olivia will be doing an open house event for this for the public.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Brett.
Just looking at, just trying to make out where the old MPO boundary was, the smooth one.
The blue or so the black, this is just what I had proposed to the boundary update committee, and then they edited it to the red. But the blue is the existing MPA. I'll just turn everything off so you can kind of see.
Yep, so the blue is the existing area.
So really,
Good representation, comparison for public involvement to see where, they can see where it changed, and then that can be explained.
yeah.
Yeah, we might be able to create a series of maps so you can see some
Yeah,
of these differences and then see them all together.
Right.
I'm hoping to, probably do like a cascade or a story map or something, and then for the open house, have a series of printed maps. And we're gonna have a passive open house at venue/FBX Beer Co. for the last half of October and first half of November. So people can go in with sticky notes, and then we'll also try to coordinate an event around that as well. But there will be two options, print and digital.
Yep, Kellen.
One thought comment, maybe I'm really getting ahead of myself here. Just a thought too, with Eielson coming in, it may be useful in the future to consider amending the bylaws to add seat to the technical committee.
Yep.
For Eielson representation.
Absolutely. I think we might want to consider that before the end of the year. So, because if the governor approves this boundary in December, it'll be the new boundary we start using beginning January. And I think that would be a great additional seat for our committee. And I know some folks that would be great representatives for Eielson to serve in those seats. John, go ahead.
Some of those blue areas look like, or did the existing metropolitan planning area like meet the criteria this time around, I guess? Some of the blue areas look like really low density. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you turn so the purple there on the screen is the census's boundary for our urban core. So yeah, there's like even in the North Pole south of Badger Road, there are some low density areas throughout there.
How do some of those swaths get captured and maybe not like a little connection between house and, or maybe these are comments that can be made during.
Yeah, and we discussed this at our subcommittee meeting yesterday as well. There, part of some of these kind of what you would consider a hole in the map is a result of some boundary smoothing, just to include the entire area. But there are some additional blue areas. Olivia, if you'll point to kind of the Chena Lake area on the right. So you got the Chena Lake area, right, low density, and then you go over to the Tanana Lakes Recreation Area. Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Yep, right there.
Those are two I was focusing on.
Yep. So there's other reasons to include some of that land in your boundary. So for those two particular recreation areas, they're very large traffic generators. So, and more commonly you see with MPO boundaries, things like airports, those are also large traffic generators. So when you have situations like this with large recreation areas or an airport, or might actually be a port facility, even though you don't have the housing density criteria that meets there are other factors that you can consider to include those. The fact that we included Tanana Lakes and Chena Lakes in our boundary, that allows us to fund some small projects, within those recreation areas. So our board has already weighed in on that and asked those to be in our boundary. And the governor did approve that boundary expansion to include those two specifically. But also, as you can see for the airport, we took in the entire airport property. So that if there are projects out there that serve the airport, since it's a very large traffic generator, we can try to provide some funding assistance for those small projects. So other factors.
My jumbled question.
Yep.
You answered it perfectly.
Okay, good.
One last comment.
Yep.
Based on John's, Mr. Hertz's question. There's about 1,000 things the census takes into account to make that purple octopus looking thing. And it changes every single year, for every single census, I should say. So that's kind of the minimum. You as or us as an organization can make this as big as we want. We just have to include that purple. That's what the federal government tells us through CFRs. And every MPO in the whole country treats these different. I'm familiar with quite a few that just take on the whole county or multiple counties to include their MPO, have their planning area that, but they also treat their federal funds very different. Where it's kind of a cherry on top grant program as opposed to maybe the main funder of a lot of the projects. I think there's a lot of positives and negatives with, we went through that list, obviously, but just the kind of current situation we have at our statewide level or federal funding level, I thought it would behoove to at least for this round, focus on kind of that minimum, and there may be reasons in the future to go a little bigger in some areas. But we could always do amendments after the fact. We did actually 2 separate amendments, if I remember correctly, to take on both Canada Lakes and Chino Lakes, because the boundary was the levee. And the most complicated project I ever worked on is the new entrance into Canada Lakes, where you couldn't spend MPO funds past the levee. And then we got a huge grant from Federal Lands Access Program that couldn't be spent on the other side. So now you have 2 different funding sources with this kind of imaginary line in there. And you can't tell a contractor, this dollar can only be spent over here and this dollar. So it just makes a lot of sense with projects like that to break them out. And there's other options as well. We partnered with DOT about a decade ago that, hey, fast planning will pay for, let me get my roads right here, the first half of Nordale Road to our boundary, and then use STIP funds to pay for the other kind of more expensive half, but get one holistic project.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion, comments, or questions? All right, I'm going to call a roll then. We'll start out with Yemi.
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kellen,
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob,
Yes.
and Danny.
Yes.
All right, thanks, everybody. That passes, and we will advance that to the policy board meeting. To try to gain ourselves a little bit of time, I'm going to see if the policy board would entertain a special meeting potentially next week to just consider this item, to release it for public comment as early as possible, so that we can kind of get through our process quicker than waiting until the end of the month on the 25th when their next scheduled meeting is. All right, we don't have any other issues today, but for informational items, beginning on page 31 is our final obligation status report for federal fiscal year 2023. And as you can see across all of our fund categories, we're 100% obligated. And then page 33 is our offset list. Again, the policy board approved using our offset balance, which is just over $40,000 towards 2024 advanced construction payback. So that zeroed out our offsets for the year. And we'll free up about $42,000 in this current federal fiscal year. And then page 34 is our current project closures list. And so these will be next month. You'll see a fresh format on these that shows our obligations for 2024 and a new offset list, which may or may not have any offsets in it quite yet. But this is kind of the last report for federal fiscal year 2023, which closed on September 30th. Any questions on obligations or offsets? Okay, not seeing any. So we'll move on to committee member comments. Are there any committee member comments today? Go ahead, John.
The guys for pedestrian crossing. We did pedestrian counts and we're waiting to process the data. We're expecting to maybe roll that analysis into the West Valley circulation study.
Okay.
And so that's for that. Trainer Gate School Crossing. We investigated it last week. And we're waiting on data to come back to that as well. We're considering a hawk there.
Excellent reports. Yeah, appreciate that because we've obviously made inquiries into both of those.
I'd like to comment too on kind of just spaced it out till now for the tenant for our project there.
Yep.
Past planning stuff. Cameron did say that DOT had done a traffic count on both that, on West Tanana and Thompson Drive.
Yep.
To see how many people basically don't even come on to the university for that, so there's the numbers somewhere. It's that one share shocker.
Yep.
In our old position, I believe that.
Okay. Yeah, we could probably get that through Scott Bachroth, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Just as, policy coming back.
And Randy's on the line here, Randy Bailey with DOT. So maybe Randy, you could track that down with Scott Bachroth. That might be an interesting statistic for both this committee and our policy board. Okay. Right, any other committee member comments? All right, not seeing any. Looks like we'll be able to get out of here an hour early today. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
This is Michelle. Move to adjourn.
Thanks, Michelle. Is there a second?
Oh, yeah, a second. This is Adiyemi Olimi.
Thank you, Yemi. All right, any opposed to adjournment? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 1:04 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.